Hello everybody, my name's Ivor Heller. I'm the Commercial Director of AFC Wimbledon, and if I were you I'd be asking what is the Commercial Director of a football club from South London doing in beautiful East, can we call it East London? Yeah. East London?
It's not Essex.
It's not Essex, no? No, really? Oh, blimey. Thank God for that.
It's a London borough.
It's a London borough, okay, sorry. Here we are over in deepest East London, and yeah, it's an interesting one. I was asked to speak really about our involvement in the community and what that actually means and how that translates from our sponsors to their companies actually growing through it, through their companies feeling good, and how you guys can then take that forward and see what you can do with a similar sort of principle. The problem is you haven't got an AFC Wimbledon here to do it with. So there's a couple of other ideas and a couple of other things that we do. I do have to say that there's Peter Streams here from your local radio station who I've known for some time. So I do have to say personally hello to Peter, and I'm absolutely over the moon to see you and that you're involved in this and you will understand a lot of what I'm talking about. So here we go. I would need to start by giving you some background. First of all, I don't know how many of you are football fans, so how many of you are football fans? Oh, that's good, that's good. Did you say you're a West Ham fan?
Yeah, it's maybe class that's football.
Oh no, definitely right now. For those of you who aren't, I think I need to give you a brief history lesson if that's okay. So Peter, go to sleep for a minute, but I need to tell you why I'm in this position, why I'm here today, what actually happened and what makes our football club and therefore me slightly different from the run-of-the-mill person involved in football and involved in community sport activities. So I'll try not to send you to sleep, all right, but I'm going to go right the way back to the early 1970s when I was just a wee lad, not much weirder than I am now. I just didn't grow too much, so all the way back to 1974-75. Now, many of you would have heard of Wimbledon Football Club. We won the FA Cup in 1988. Absolutely incredible story. But it starts much sooner than that, so I need to tell you this background to get to where we got to. In 1974-75, Wimbledon Football Club was a small club. So anyway, yes, 74-75, Wimbledon were a club similar size to Romford, which was then a similar size to what I would say kind of Dagenham and Redbridge now. Do you all know Dagenham and Redbridge? Have we got any Dagenham and Redbridge fans here? No. That's a shame. That's a shame. Okay. That makes it even more difficult to get my story across. But anyway, so you've got the size of club that we were. Wimbledon bought in a new manager, bought a new team with, and completely out of despair really, this football club that had absolutely no money somehow cobbled together a fantastic team of semi-professional footballers that took the non-league world, the non-league side of football by storm. But not only that, it took the FA Cup. You remember the FA Cup? It used to be the greatest competition in the world. Now it's been hugely devalued, but it's still very important to an awful lot of clubs. And therefore, going right back to those days, it was the most important competition in football, in my opinion. Certainly up there with the Championship. Wimbledon started on an FA Cup run, and in the third round of the FA Cup in 1974-75, Wimbledon played a team called Burnley, which most of you would have heard of. Burnley at the time were, apparently they were third in Division 1. I always thought they were fifth, but I was told by a Burnley player a few weeks ago that they were third, who actually played in that game. And Little Wimbledon, non-league team, went up to Turf Moor and beat the team that were then third in Division 1. Now, the big part of that story is that hadn't happened for 65 years. That a non-league team had been to a first division ground. So this was in 74-75. It hadn't happened for 65 years. The really good news is it hasn't happened since. Nobody's ever done it since. So basically, it is now a once in 100 year occurrence that a non-league team will go to a Premier League team. Never mind the team third. I mean, who's third in the Premier League at the moment? Who is it? Is it Newcastle? Okay, well, maybe that is more believable. Let's say it was Chelsea that were third, Chelsea that were fourth. You couldn't imagine a non-league team now going and achieving something. If it's Newcastle, you never know. So if there are any Newcastle fans, I'm really apologising. So we did that, and then we went on and we drew Leeds. And Leeds, 6 months later, were in the European Cup final. So this is the equivalent of Wimbledon playing, who lost in the, Man United, that was it, they lost in the European Cup final. Leeds unfortunately lost 1-0. We went up to Ellen Road with the most fantastic Leeds team, drew 0-0. Our goalkeeper saved a penalty from the guy with the hardest shot in the world, Peter Lorimer. That guy, Dickie Guy, who became quite famous at the time, is now our club president. So this is where we start to get the links in the story. The captain from that team in 1974-75 was a guy called Ian Cook. He's now a non-executive director of the football club. And this is where we really start to get into things. Wimbledon then got knocked out by Leeds 1-0 in the replay in front of 46,000 people at Selhurst Park. Our home ground was too small to stage the game. That, do you think, would be enough to get you elected into the league, which you had to do in those days? Unfortunately, closed shop and all of that, Wimbledon weren't allowed in. And this persisted for 3 years, that we weren't allowed in to the Football League. After 3 years of winning the Southern League, of which the last team to do that was Tottenham in 1902, 103, 104, we got elected into the Football League, and great parties happened. Fantastic things, but then everyone kind of forgot about Wimbledon for a little while, until all of a sudden we got a manager by the name of Dave Bassett, and the team progressed, went up the leagues rather quickly, and 9 years later found themselves in the Premier League. Now, most of you, do you know of Dagenham and Redbridge? You know of Dagenham and Redbridge? Well, Wimbledon were the size of Dagenham and Redbridge. Actually, they were smaller when we got into the league. Wimbledon were a slightly smaller team than them. So you try and picture 9 years from now, Dagenham and Redbridge in the Premier League. It's quite a difficult thing to picture, isn't it? I mean, I actually hope it happens. They're a really nice club, do a good carvery. I can recommend it. But it was an impossible thing to dream. That first year, in 1986-87, Wimbledon did the double over Manchester United. We were the first team, I think it was in 57 matches or a ridiculous run, to go to Anfield and win at Anfield to beat Liverpool. We beat Chelsea at Chelsea 4-0. It was quite a story. It was a big story. Everyone said, OK, you've had your year there, now you're going to go down. Now you're finished. That wasn't true. After finishing 6th in the First Division or the Premier League that year, the next season we went on and we only went and won the FA Cup. And May the 14th, 1988, Wimbledon FC won the FA Cup. Now that's fantastic, it's brilliant. We all had a great time, big party, I'll never forget it. I was still recovering from the hangover. You know, it was a wonderful time. Then, the next season, unfortunately, we had the Hillsborough disaster. A couple of seasons before that, there'd been the Heysel incident where a lot of fans lost their life when Liverpool played Juventus in Belgium in a European, it wasn't a European Cup final, was it? It was a UEFA Cup final, I think it was. Anyway, it was a shocking incident, and those two incidents changed the face of football. They then turned around and said, OK, we've got to have all-seater stadiums. Now, some of you are too young to remember terrace grounds, but for those of you that actually go to football, you remember the terracing used to give a fantastic atmosphere at football. Clubs with smaller grounds, particularly Wimbledon, QPR, Fulham at the time, several other stadiums were really going to be in trouble with this changeover into all-seater stadiums. Eventually, they worked it out that Wimbledon could no longer play at our ancestral home, which was a place called Plough Lane, and we moved to Selhurst Park, which was Crystal Palace's ground. The promise was that we were going to move and then they'd find a new ground for us in our local conurbation. Unfortunately, that was never going to happen, and here we go with the rest of the story, because that led to Wimbledon stayed in the Premier League for 14 years, which was a miracle. As the smallest club that's ever been in the Premier League, there's no doubt about that. Eventually we got relegated. As soon as we got relegated, the stories started in earnest about what they were going to do with Wimbledon Football Club. The first story was we were going to move Wimbledon Football Club to Dublin. It sounds funny, but it was very upsetting for us Wimbledon fans. And you know, we played Southampton live on Sky one Sunday, and there were 5,000 banners, posters all over the ground, you know, say no to Dublin, or you know, all sorts of slogans on them. I happened to print I run, my day job is running a small printing firm, and we happened to be able to print 5,000 posters that week that got live on Sky with some big banners, you know, Dublin equals death, and which some of the Dubliners apparently weren't too happy with, but it wasn't aimed at them, honestly. eventually Dublin went away, and then these horrible rumours about a move to a place called Milton Keynes. Anyone ever been to Milton Keynes? Land of many roundabouts. Without trying to insult Milton Keynes too much, the discussions carried on, and Wimbledon, who had now been bought by some horrific Norwegian gentlemen, they eventually managed to kill the club enough that they could successfully uproot and move the club to Milton Keynes. Now, this in itself is a terrible, terrible thing. But, and here we go with the real crux of the stories. On May the 28th, 2002, the FA had appointed an independent panel that decided they would let Little Wimbledon uproot and move to Milton Keynes. They released a document that was very thick. In the crux of it, it suggested that a Wimbledon town type football club would not be in the wider interests of football. Right, so there's something important in that. It was a catalyst for much anger. A club in Wimbledon or in that locality would not be in the wider interests of football. Whoever wrote that really needs to go and have a lay down in a dark room. It was very insulting and very upsetting for a lot of us, but what it did do was help to fire the anger of an awful lot of people. Now, we'd been demonstrating as a community, and I think, Peter, you'd back me up with this. It's something that grew, the anger grew and grew and grew. But what we managed to do was, when we demonstrated, when we actually said that we weren't going to go along with this move to Milton Keynes, we did the whole thing with amazing dignity. Now, which is amazing for someone like me. I could be quite tempestuous. I've got little man's disease in double doses, which can be quite shocking at times, but it's very true. So there we were, faced with this horrible dilemma. And on May the 28th, they made the decision. They said, you can go. Now, I'd already talked to a couple of other people and said, if they say we're going to go to Milton Keynes, I think that we should start a new club. And everyone went, ha, 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 you're barking mad. And I said, no, actually, I think we can do this. I think that we start something, and we start something called a community club. And they said, well, why? The community of Wimbledon doesn't necessarily look like it wants to support this football club. And I'm like, well, actually, I think it does. And I think that we can do this. So a group of 4 of us had got together, and by the close of play on May the 28th, after they'd made the announcement, because I'd had a tip-off the night before, we knew everything that we had to do to launch this new football club. Now I'm going to cut through the next bit, because as much as some of you may want to hear all the nitty-gritty of it, I think the rest of you will be asleep in about 5 minutes if I go through all the various other bits that went on around that. We had 12 days to launch the club. We managed to do that. We got a ground share deal in place. We launched an appeal to get the money to do it. We received £80,000 in 3 days. That's how long it took to get the money to get the club launched. It was a miracle. Everything fell right. Bang, 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 bang. AFC Wimbledon as a football club were launched really 12 days after being destroyed. Yeah, it was literally as simple as that. We decided very quickly that the 2 shareholders of the club, which myself and a guy called Chris Stewart, were going to sell our share to our supporters trust. So we were going to be owned by the fans, run by the fans, for the fans. That sounds quite corny, but it's exactly the way that it is. And that's what happened. And it seemed that because I come from quite a commercial background, it was decided that I would be the commercial director, and that Chris Stewart, my good friend and colleague in setting up the club, who got made redundant on May the 28th that year, which was very useful indeed, let me tell you, became our chairman, and a guy called Trevor Williams became our secretary, and that was it. The club was launched. We then got, where we were really lucky, we got a guy come along to us by the name of Eric Samuelson, who said, I want to be your finance director. And now, the good news for us, and this is something that for anyone that works in a voluntary organisation or any kind of something that needs to be community orientated, is our finance guy was a senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Now, that gave us great credibility. And Eric's manoeuvring and knowing how to play the finances of things helped set us up the way that we are now. So let's move forward again so I can just finish off the history of it all. AFC Wimbledon were launched. We play our first match on July the 10th after only really being formed at the beginning of June. We didn't even know the names of our players. I mean, one of our players was actually announced as coming on as a second half substitute, and his name was Trigger. That was the best that we knew, and it was wonderful. Our first match was played at Sutton United in front of, they lost count at just under 5,000 people. They ran out of toilet rolls, sausage rolls, every kind of roll you could imagine they ran out of. They ran out of beer, they ran out of crisps. It was absolutely amazing. We lost 4-0, that was no big surprise particularly, and there was a pitch invasion in celebration. It was just an absolutely incredible time, and if you ever get a chance to look it up on YouTube, you'll understand just how amazing it all was. So AFC Wimbledon was born, and we launched into a league called the Combined Counties League, which is a tiny little league where you play around fences. Our first competitive game was played in front of 2,500 people, and I had to stand on a hay bale to be able to see at Sandhurst Town. We won that first match, and then it kind of went a bit downhill that season from there. We didn't go up that season, and this was 9 short years ago. To put it into perspective, I'm going to cut all the rest of the football history out of it now because I think I've set the scene nicely. We have had 5 promotions, and in May last year we played Luton Town at the City of Manchester Stadium when it got heated seats in the director's box. It was lovely. It was too warm for them, but I had to try them anyway, It seemed like the right thing to do. If the Sheik can use them, I can use them, believe you me. So there we were. We played Luton Town, and we drew 0-0 with them, but we beat them on penalties, and all of a sudden, 9 short years later, AFC Wimbledon had their place back in the Football League. It's an absolute raging miracle. Whichever way you want to dress it up, however it's happened, and this has been done, and this is where we really get to the know of it. The whole thing has been done by being a community club. We have not got one major benefactor. We have not got one person that goes put their hands in their pocket and says, here's £500,000, go buy a team, go build a stand, whatever. Everything that we've done ourselves. We launched as a PLC to be able to buy the ground that we play in. So now we can raise revenue through that. We're run almost solely by volunteers. The whole thing is this massive community thing. We bought in, and this is the bit where you guys will be interested, we bought in several bits of sponsorship and ways that we could work with our fans, where they could get benefit from being involved with us, and we get benefit by getting their money. The first thing that we brought in, which was a scheme that I ran, was called the Don's Directory. Now, lots of people, again, they looked at me and said, Ivor, you are barking mad, but if you think that this is going to work the way that you do. And I said, well, actually, no. The idea of it is this. It's Don's fans, because that's what we call the Don's fans working for Don's fans. And this is where things start to translate into clubs and other associations that you have. Right. If I am going to buy anything, I'm going to buy something from one of my fellow fans. I think I'm going to get the best deal that way. Similar way to Chamber of Commerce. If I can't find anything from a fan, I'll go to the Merton Chamber of Commerce. And then we spread ourselves out wider and so on. Don's fans working for Don's fans worked absolutely incredibly for us because it was a whole £100 to get in. And my plan and what I hoped for was that we couldn't be like ordinary non-league teams. Have any of you ever been to a non-league football match? So you remember the programmes that you get, have Fred the Plumber, Joe the Barber, the local CAF and so on. They pay £50 and get a year's worth of advertising in a programme that gets bought by the same 50 people every week and so on. And it's wonderful. I think it's absolutely fantastic that happens. We kind of knew quite early on, by the fact that we'd sold over 2,000 season tickets in our first season, that our marketplace was a bit bigger than that. So therefore what we didn't want to do was exclude the small advertiser. We wanted to bring in the small advertiser, and the way we did that was by launching the Don's Directory for £100. The Don's Directory then, what we actually did was list everybody in the programme, we listed them online, and we produced a hard copy brochure. We had about 100 people advertised in the first season. What it did do though was set people alight in the community. What they realised was if they went on the Don's directory, they didn't, it wasn't like going in any other directory where, you know, direct mail, you generally get at the most a 1% return. The Don's directory gave you a much higher percentage return than that from the 3,000 fans that regularly went to use it. So what actually happened was in our second season, we had people getting in touch with us saying, Ivor, we want to spend some more money. And I'm like, well, why is that? And they said, well, we made so much out of being on the Don's directory last year, we want to spend some more money. There are others that were much smaller companies that just stayed there, but we kept that sector of our community happy. And that was the real trick of it. Now, you might be asking, how does that apply to Romford? How does that apply to the Havering business area? Well, the question is, to you guys is, I can't tell you exactly how that applies, other than I guarantee you that there are athletics clubs, there are small football clubs, you've got Dagenham and Redbridge down the road. There are communities there that you guys can actually go and actively work with. You be part of it. And Peter, I know, because you actually know what we did, you know how it worked. You saw it work with your own eyes, and you know, because it's easy for me to come up here and make wild statements about what we actually achieved, both commercially and sponsorship wise, but we actually did it. It's real, it's the truth, it's quite well documented, it's easy for anyone to see. We went out there, we went into the community and we did it, and we did it in lots of different ways, not just with things like the Don's directory. We work with other local companies, and we work on big charity events. You know, you may look at me and say I'm quite a handsome little fella one way and another, which I'm sure that you'll, yes you do, don't you? But well, my hair's shorter than it normally is, and there's a reason for it. We took the team, not all of them, a few of them, the manager and myself, and I said, look, you know, great thing for us to do. One of our sponsors is running a big charity event. Let's go along to that charity event, let's support it, and we should try and help them raise some money. And they said, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, don't know. Tell you what, you lot should go up on stage and you should have your head shaved. We'll auction each one of you, the players, the manager, and see what you can get. And they all turned around to me and said, well, we're only going to do that if you do it. I thought, oh no, me and my big mouth can't bottle out of it. But we did it. Between us at the club, we managed to raise over £14,000 for a children's hospice that night. £14,000. I'm going to tell you now, I've got £8,000 for this haircut. This is over 3 weeks old now. so it's grown back quite nicely, hasn't it? But the power of the community now what that also did for us is the people whose do it was, you know, in the banqueting suite spent £3,500 with us. Because we bothered to go turn up at their thing. The people who run the event spend £25,000 a year for us. We have been inundated with inquiries ever since because of the publicity that we got and because of our entrenchment in our local community. Now, I don't know what you've got here. I've been on my sick bed for a couple of weeks, I'm afraid, so I didn't have enough time to research, and I did want to try and get someone from Dagenham and Redbridge to come and get involved here, because this is the sort of thing that we do all the time in our community. And I believe that not just football, but sport in general can play a much wider role in our community and a much wider role in our businesses. You know, as small businesses, if you want to get your name out there, if you want to get known, then try and be a square peg in a round hole sometimes. Have a go at helping the local athletics club. I'll guarantee you there's an athletics club around here somewhere that's training. There'll be some athletes training for the Paralympics there. You know, help them out. They're going to get in the news for this area. You know, and if your businesses are associated with that sort of thing, you know, I think Romford Football Club's still going, isn't it? You know, I remember we actually played them at the Ilford Stadium, the Ilford Athletics track.
That's not there.
Is that not there anymore? You see that was very famous because it had the Ilford Athletics track had orange lights. Orange floodlights that faced on the running track. So by the time the football got into the middle of the park, you couldn't see a damn thing. I don't know if did you go there, Peter, when we played them? It was in the London Senior Cup, a well-renowned competition that we played. I think it was Ilford that we actually played. But the funny thing that night, and I will tell you a very funny story, because we brought about 500 fans over there, which was, you know, for quite a small competition that we were involved in. A lot of people still came over, went to the game, and it was a really boring game. It was rubbish, and you couldn't see in the middle of the park because the floodlights just hit the athletics track, and people were losing interest in the game. But all of a sudden I heard a rumble. And I thought, oh God, you know, this doesn't sound right. You know, there were never any police or anything at our games, and what had happened was some of the lads that follow the club had actually got onto the running track and had decided that they were going to sort an argument out they've been having in the bar, as after 5 pints, who could run the 100 metres the fastest. And they literally had a race down the outside of the track there. It was a wonderful thing. But we spread our money all over the country, including into this area. We've played several clubs around this neck of the woods, and it's been a wonderful experience. So I know I've talked about the football club. I've talked about our involvement in the community, our involvements in sponsorship and so on. I think that for some of you probably found the football story a lot more interesting than the sponsorship side of it, and I apologise for that. But I hope that you've been entertained by what I've told you, and I would really like to ask you if you've got any questions for me, because I think that would be more interesting than me just rambling about various things that we've done. So has anyone got any questions? I don't mind answering football questions, by the way.
Yeah, very entertaining. Coming from a Chelsea supporter, I'd take my hat off to you.
Thank you.
I'd like to know how you approach this question of sponsorship and support. I mean, do you write begging letters to people? No. Do you go around and beat them up? You know, like the actual approach, is that dependent on how much money you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, there's we do the kind of blanket mailing, the marketing that you do just through attacking the various names in the local postcode and so on. We do that, but we're a little bit more subtle than that. We tend to do it by stealth, by being involved in things. It is what actually brings us the greatest results. That's what the point I'm really trying to get across. You know, by us being involved in so many community activities, our community actually sees us doing good things, and therefore, like for instance, and I will use it as a for instance, if this same conference was going on in Merton today, I guarantee you the football club would be there with 3 or 4 representatives, regardless. Absolutely regardless, apart from the fact that we'd actually have some fans in the audience almost for sure, but we would make sure that we were there to show our support for the local business community, because we want that local business community to support us. So yes, we don't send actual begging letters. Actually, Chelsea send begging letters. You'd be amazed what they send out in the area. Is quite incredible. And a good friend of mine's a director at Stamford Bridge, and I constantly rib him that they approach it in this very traditional method. You know, some of it's quite clever, and but it's also quite frustrating that we couldn't afford to do that kind of stuff really to the degree that they do. We get everything through involvement, and that is the real key. And I think that that's really important for businesses. You know, if you're going to get involved with an organisation, even with a charity, charity is a wonderful way to actually raise your profile. You know, I'm sure that most of you do some kind of charity work or whatever, but when you do, you'll get fantastic publicity from doing good things for good people. That's an absolute certainty. You know, you align your name with a good cause, people will take notice of it, and they will come back and use your company because they know you're good people.
The question of relevance with the product. We can invite football club for a business meeting. Do you think this is a relevant area they would be interested to come?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the first part of the question.
People to sponsor the event have to have some relevance with the product. They will be only interested to spend money if they're relevant to the product.
Yes, I mean, stop me if I'm not answering your question correctly here, because as far as people selling products through the club, is that really where you go? Okay. The way we will do that is, again, because of the sort of club we are, you get huge buy-in. So when we turn around to people and say, like, we've got a deal with a company called A-Plan Insurance, and the way that they sell through us is every time you buy a policy from them, £25 gets given to the football club. Okay, so they were the first company that came to us and said, we want to do a deal where we paid a football club for something. We said, okay, how much do you want to pay us to do that? And they were the first ones that said, okay, well, we'll take out a package for $3,500, and then we'll pay you a slice of every deal that we get through the football club. They were the first ones that ever actually did that, because there's an awful lot of these schemes where people come up and say, we'll give you a slice of the action. And we say, okay, well, give us a slice of the action up front, and then a slice of the action, and we'll talk to you. So we have to have some hard commerciality there. But companies that come in and do that with us, which there are a few more have come on board now, their sales improve for it. They're very happy that they're involved with something as good and as clean as our football club, and that leads to more and more of that happening. And we're just about to enter into a deal with a Vauxhall dealer that is doing the same thing, and the deals that they're offering us are absolutely incredible, and they will sell cars. So there's great value for our sponsors in it. Does that answer the question? Yeah, good.
I'm not going to let you. Just for those who don't know, I've been a season ticket holder since the start of AFC Wimbledon, one of the founder members too. So, yeah, I appreciate what you've said, and the history is really important to a lot of people. But from a hard commercial point of view, obviously the team has done well. 9 years, and it's into the Football League, 5 promotions. That must help enormously. But are there risks for the club now? I mean, if sponsorship money is coming in on the back of regularly appearing on TV, Sky Sports here and there, press coverage because we're in League Two, is there a risk if the season goes badly? It doesn't look like it is, but at some point, if it's looking really bad, are a lot of those deals then going to be dependent on being in League Two, and it all could potentially fall down? Or are the structures firm enough to sustain that potential risk?
Okay,
because that's a unique risk for sort of a football or sporting team, that because of performances on the pitch, the commercial outlook could completely change because crowds will reduce, whatever happens.
Well, I think it's a great question, Peter, and thank you for that. There are. I need to tell you a little bit about the football business. The football business is totally different to any other business. It's completely irrational. Where we're different to just about any other football club that you could go to is that we only cut our cloth accordingly. So when we do our budgets, we work out our budgets in such a way that we basically work our wage structure out, and we under budget. So we will think that our average crowd is going to be 3,800, and knowing full well that we will get 3,800, and we will work our money out, what we can afford to pay our players on 3,800 people coming through the door and maintaining our current level of commercial income. The good news is that our current crowds are, although we did budget for 3,850 this year, there's no secret in that, we're very transparent, we're averaging 4,380 or something at the moment. So we're quids in on that. We also budget for no money to come in from cups whatsoever. So if we have an FA Cup run or we do particularly well, we haven't budgeted for that money, so that goes on top. Our commercial budget, generally, by the time we've come to finalise our budgets, we know what our commercial income is going to be to a minimum. Because we've already done the deals. We've got a rolling deal with our main sponsor, which is absolutely huge, but that has to be renewed by February. So, for instance, if we were to lose that, we'd know before we set our player budget. So the dangers of falling back down the leagues, yes, they're very real, but if that happens, our model will still be a sustainable model. I can tell you that one of the funniest conversations that I say funny, it's not funny, it made me laugh at the time, but it's quite sad. One of the funniest, we were at a match up north. I won't tell you the team that we were playing, but we sat down with the chairman there, and we knew that they were paying their players a lot more than us, but their average crowd was somewhere around 1,500 lower than us. But their chairman was always on about the business of football and how things should be run and so on and so on. And we sat down with him and we said, look, we don't understand. How can you pay the players what you're paying? He's not a Roman Abramovich, so he's not writing out cheques for millions and millions of pounds. How can you pay your players? And he said, well, what we do is we budget for a £300,000 loss. Yeah, that's what we said. Wow. How can you do this? And he said, well, we rely on having a cup run. And we're like, but what happens when you get knocked out in the first round? He said, well, then we hope that we're doing well in the league and our crowds are above what we've actually... But you've already budgeted for a £300,000 loss. It's insane. And the whole of football is built, and that's why you read so regularly in the newspapers about why so many businesses have floundered, because there are people there, egos get involved, and they get a massive wish list, and they just commit money that they haven't got. A club that is actually a little bit smaller than us and plays not very far from us, we went to them a few years ago in a cup match, and again we knew that their budgets were much higher than us, and we said to them, how comes? They said, well, we budget to get to the second round of the FA Cup every season. They start in the fourth qualifying round, and it's just like, why do you do that? Because when you don't get there, you're immediately £100,000 short of your budget. And a small business, I mean, I've got no idea about the size of your businesses here, but I'm fairly sure that most of you, if you lose £100,000 worth of income, your business will know all about it. I know that mine certainly would, and our football club would. So budgeting carefully and knowing, having an idea of what you can actually bring in, not just as a football club, but as a business, it's pretty sound, straightforward advice, isn't it? So the football world is very murky. We're not. We run it as a proper business, and I think that that's a really important thing. And I think that to a very large degree, the club down the road from here, Dagenham and Redbridge, are very similar. They cut their cloth accordingly to what they can bring in. Whether they do it to the same degree and with the same diligence as we do, they're not quite run the same way as us. They're not a million miles off. The other club that's run like us, that is very similar to us, is a little club that you might have heard of called Barcelona. So whereas we've started off very small, once upon a time, Barcelona were actually, believe it or not, a smaller club than us. It was a long time ago, but they're run very much the same. They're a fans-owned, fans-run organisation. They just happen to have a president every year that gets elected on how much they're going to pump into the club, and it's usually like hundreds of millions or whatever. But we're not like that. We're never going to be like that. Is there any more questions? Did that answer your question, Peter? Are there any more questions?
Ivor, most of the time when you get sponsorship from local companies, you're looking at sponsorship for the year or for the season. But on the odd occasion when you have an event coming up and you want individual sponsors for that particular event, what sort of lead-in time do you take, and how long do you give companies to come forward to sponsor you for a particular event?
That's an interesting one. That's more difficult for us here because we've got an asset in as far as the football ground is concerned. We run music and we run comedy and we run all sorts of different things there, and we try to get sponsorship for let's face it, everything is helped by getting sponsorship. So we will, depends on what it is. Like the kids' Christmas party, we'll start looking for straight after Christmas. For the next year. Some other events, we've got a whole year to try and find someone, and usually someone comes in and says, I want to pay for that, and they often don't want any publicity about it either, because it's something that we do we do several Christmas parties, but for our junior fans, we put the party on for nothing. We don't charge them. They get the goalkeeper is Santa Claus. He normally drops the kids, that sort of thing. So the answer is that we try and give as much as we can. We've got two other big events coming up. We're doing our first darts tournament. We're doing our first poker tournament. And we're looking for sponsors for those at the moment. They're in February. So far, we haven't got any. So if anyone wants to sponsor a darts or a poker tournament, a long way away from home, you're more than welcome, So it's as long as possible.
You said the world of football was murky.
Yeah.
How long do you reckon Harry's going down for?
No comment, Your Honour. Oh dear. I will say this, allegedly, I've heard of some of the most incredulous stories of I mean, really. Oh dear, yeah. There's an awful lot of wrongdoing going on in football. The fact that Harry Redknapp has been caught for £180,000 of tax evasion is the very, very tip of the iceberg. That's an absolute certainty. It's been going on for as long as football's been going on, and it's an absolute crying shame that football's some of the legacy of football, and particularly the lower down you go, the worse it gets. That's the bit that people don't realise. And the FA, which I believe is quite a toothless organisation, could do something about it. They choose not to because they don't want to rock the boat. They keep the pyramid, the football pyramid, the way that it is, and unfortunately, the lower down you get, the worse it gets. The higher up stuff, we probably never ever really find out about, except in Harry's case.
Not sure if I got my facts completely right, but didn't AFC Wimbledon play Milton Keynes Wimbledon last year or the year before or something, and was you there for that? No,
we didn't play. Milton Keynes Dons is what they're actually called. We refer to them as the franchise. We're not very fond of them. Luckily. Actually, it's a very common question, and again, for those of you that aren't football fans, the rivalry. You've heard of Celtic and Rangers. That's a big rivalry. That is nothing compared to Wimbledon and Milton Keynes. The last year in the FA Cup, Milton Keynes drew their first match with Stevenage, and AFC Wimbledon drew their first match with Ebbsfleet United in the first round of the FA Cup, and then lo and behold, like two magnets, we were drawn together in the second round, but we both had to win our replays. Now, luckily and thankfully, Stevenage equalised in the first match 4 minutes into injury time. They did it again in the second match, and then they won on a penalty shootout, and they knocked Milton Keynes out in a penalty shootout. We went through with a last-minute winner, and thankfully, thanks to them, we got a live TV match against Stevenage, which ITV were not very happy about. It was too late to change it. They couldn't miss. If we ever play each other, it'll be a huge story. But we don't want to play them. We don't recognise them as a proper football club. Yes, the strength of feeling is very, very deep and goes right away from the top of the club to the bottom.
And what's the difference in leagues at the moment?
At one. When it started out, there were 9 leagues in between us. 9 years ago, there were 9 leagues in between us. They stole our football club. They've managed to go backwards a step. We've managed to go up 5 steps, basically. And because of the way the pyramid system works, we are now literally 1 step behind them. And even if I say so myself, I think that's just it's an incredible achievement, and it's a great story. And watch this space, there will be a film one of these days. And anyone that says that DeVito's going to play me, you've got it wrong. It's Pesci all the way, believe me. Anything else?
Ivor Heller, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.